Welcome to On Spec, where you can hear stories that bring you closer to the globe. I'm your host, Fariba Nawa. The pandemic has been unnerving for most people, and while men have been dying more from COVID-19, women are also dying at the hands of men. Domestic violence has gone up globally as families are stuck in quarantine. Men are taking out their frustrations on women and abusing, beating, and killing them. The rate of violence has gone up more than 50% in many parts of the world. Experts are calling it the shadow pandemic. Our intern and journalist Menel Raach introduces us to a Syrian refugee in Iraq on the run from her ex-husband. He's been trying to kill her and their children. How will this woman save herself and her family?
Let's call
her Aisha, because revealing her real name would be dangerous for her. Aisha is telling me that she's always dealt with violence. Her ex-husband Samir, that's not his real name, knew she and her children were scared of him, especially when he brought gas to light on fire or a knife to terrorize them late at night, depending on how drunk he was. Aisha says she and her 4 kids flee or the police arrest him, but only for a short while before he's out of prison again.
I'm originally from Al-Hasaka in Syria. I have 4 kids. Frankly, I'm just a housewife.
Aisha is 39 years old, and she's not just a housewife. She's also seamstress who supported her family in Syria. You can hear her sewing clothes for her children as she chats with them in Kurdish. She lives in Iraq's Kurdish region with about 250,000 other Syrian refugees. Aisha normally resides in a refugee camp with her kids, but she's rarely in the mud brick shack she calls home. When I began talking to her on WhatsApp, she told me she's been on the run with her children, from her relative's house to her neighbors in search of safety. I'm from Tunisia, but studying journalism in the US. One of the first things that came to my mind about shared experiences during the pandemic was how and why domestic violence is increasing. I witnessed a father beating his young son on the street of Tunis 3 years ago, and I stood there in shock, just watching, afraid to do anything. I walked away, but could not stop thinking about the child. I felt guilty. When I heard Aisha's story, I wanted to share it because I can't just stand by and watch the violence anymore. In Tunisia, laws protect women and children. It's one of the more progressive Arab countries. But in Iraq and Syria, war has ravaged the justice system. Frankly, even before the wars, justice for women survivors of violence rarely existed. Aisha's story resonated with me because she's a survivor of destructive patriarchal society, archaic traditions, and poverty. But she's no victim, because speaking up like she's with me, this takes guts.
والله أنا كنت طالب الصف 9 وأنا وابن عمو كنا أصدقاء كنا مثل أخوي.
Honestly, I was just a student in the 9th grade. I knew his cousin. We were friends. We were very close, the cousin and I. His cousin was 2 years younger than me. His cousin told my ex-husband, but I'm a very polite and respectful girl. He thought it would be great if I joined their family by marrying his cousin. So Samira and I met. We started seeing each other for nearly 5 years. Then he asked me to marry him twice, but my family refused. Then I escaped with him when I was 18 years old. But I didn't know that he is a drinker. No one told me, but even though his family knew.
المشكلة زواجي ما كان مثل ما تقول يعني مرتين جي خطبوني من أهلي ما وافقوا. هو خطفني خطيفة يعني أنا كان عمري 18 سنة.
Aisha didn't want to run away with Samir because that would tarnish her and her family's reputation. So Aisha says Samir kind of kidnapped her in persuading her to escape with him. Aisha says she was so young, she didn't know what she was doing. He took her to another city in Syria. When her family found out, they felt dishonored.
ما استرت لأنه أخوي هددني. أبوي كان يحكي معي يقول مثلا هي مؤامرة. أبوي كان يعرف منه من أهله عرفوا.
I was afraid of my brother because he threatened to kill me, even though my father knew that I was kidnapped. But my brother would have killed me. My sister-in-law didn't encourage me to go back home because it was a big risk that I could be killed. Then I contacted my mother and finally my husband's family met my family and they had an agreement.
وأهله ساووا دعوتي. أبوه جاوا اجوا على بيت أهلي وجابوا زلم والشباب يعني شيوخ كبار جابوا وجابوا على أهلي.
Samir started hitting Aisha with his hands just 4 months after the marriage. But she was already pregnant with her firstborn, a son.
هونيك كان في ضرب أكثر من هلا.
But my life was hard in Syria too, because my ex-husband was beating me and forcing me to work a lot. I used to work on farms. I was raising chicken. During the winter, I was washing our clothes with freezing water.
Aisha says Samir didn't have a steady job. She was the main breadwinner throughout their marriage. I asked Aisha if she could have left the marriage at any point in Syria since she had some financial independence.
To be honest, I was afraid of my family and my brother. I didn't want the divorce in the beginning because my father wanted me to leave my son with my husband. Besides, I knew very well that if I divorced, my family would insult and humiliate me for getting married without their approval. So I preferred to struggle with a violent husband than be humiliated every day by my family.
كل يوم راح يحكوا لي هالحكي كمان. فتحسن شيء كمل حياتي بالظلم وخلص.
Aisha had 3 more kids, all together 2 girls and 2 boys, with Samir. The youngest is 8 and the oldest 14. She says her mother encouraged her to keep having children despite the abuse, because they might end up being her saviors from a life of suffering. When the war reached their city in Syria, the family fled to northern Iraq in 2012. Aisha's extended family moved to Turkey, and Samir's family stayed in Syria. Aisha no longer felt controlled by her or his family, but she says Samir became even more unstable and the abuse became more frequent in Iraq.
تقريبا شي 3 مرات بس يعني إنه يضرب أولادي.
He attacked us 3 times during the last week. He beat my children. I ran away with my children when he went to the kitchen. Usually, he's grabbing my hair, but when he wants to start beating me, I run away with my children. We escaped through the back door. Sometimes we went to my friends or my cousins to spend the night with them. I remember once we escaped at 11 at night. It was raining. My kids were crying and saying that they wanted to sleep. We spent a long time walking in the street until we ended up at my friend's home.
رايحين في الشارع رايحين جاي اولادي يقول يا والله بدنا ننام اقول والله ما في يعني وين اخذكم اخر شيء رحنا عند صديقتي ونمنا هونيك.
Desperate and scared, Aisha reached out to Harikar, a local NGO. Harikar introduced her to Dilman Tahir Yusuf, a lawyer who helps abused women. And with Yusuf's assistance, Aisha was finally able to divorce Samir nearly 2 years ago. Police jailed Samir after Aisha filed a domestic violence complaint against him, but they can't keep him locked up for long. Yusuf told on Spec that the maximum penalty for beating someone you live with in northern Iraq is only 6 months.
عم قل لهم أنا عم قل لهم هذا عنكم عم يهددني يقول شو بدي يساوي ما يقدر يساوي شيء.
He threatens me in front of the police. The police arrest him always, every time he sends a pledge to stop. But it's not enough. He is attacking us after the arrest too. Once he was arrested for 6 months and we felt relieved. But we were still afraid because we knew that he can be released from the prison on government amnesty. I'm asking the police to arrest him or send him to Syria, but what can they do?
بس 6 أشهر. آخر شيء قلت للشرطة يا أخي والله يعني احبسوه رموه على سوريا يقول لي ما.
Gender-based violence is on the rise in Iraq, like many other countries, but there are no reliable numbers. Before the pandemic, family members abused nearly half of the women in Iraq. That's according to the United Nations Population Fund. In Baghdad, the law condones men to hit women, like parents can discipline their children. After almost 20 years since the US invaded Iraq, the Iraqi justice system treats women like second-class citizens. Rasha Khalid is a lawyer with Baghdad Women's Association. She represents women in court and is lobbying for laws to protect women.
في العراق غالباً ليس لدينا ثقافة شكوى للإبلاغ عن حالات العنف الأسري.
Also, we do not have a culture of filing complaints or reporting cases of domestic violence in Iraq. Most crimes are hidden. The cases we have received are through telephone calls by women dealing with violence. The cases that have been exposed are through the media, most of them after the women are already dead, including victims who were burned after being shot on the street.
تم يعني بعد رميهم بالشارع بعد هذا يلا يعني طفحت.
Rasha says advocates noticed an increase of gender-based violence after the pandemic. Hotlines for help for victims were ringing off the hook.
وذلك لأنه عوامل كثيرة.
We can say that the cases have doubled during the quarantine. Many factors have contributed to this, including the difficulty of reaching or communicating with law enforcement agencies. Also, due to lack of communication with the families. The most vulnerable are especially those who are asking for family support. But unfortunately, they cannot go back home to their families because of the long-distance commute and lockdown. Commonly, phone calls to hotlines are interrupted by family members.
Not all of Iraq is the same. Iraq's Kurdish region, known as KRG, is semi-autonomous, and some laws are different than the federal areas of the country. For example, KRG, where Aisha lives, passed a law to prosecute domestic violence in the last decade. In the rest of Iraq, religious groups have prevented the same law from passing. But even in KRG, when abusers spend only 6 months in jail, they continue to hit their children and women again once they are freed. Women's rights advocates say that have made strides for justice, but a long-term solution will take time. There are a handful of secret private shelters for abused women in federal Iraq. In KRG, there are several government ones. Aisha stayed in a shelter in the past. On Spec tried to help her find another shelter recently, but she said no. Samir disappeared while I was reporting this story. Aisha told me Samir had returned to Syria for now, but he could easily come back to Iraq. Globally, the pandemic emboldened abusers to be more violent against women. With impunity, authorities respond slower, and the rate of increase is pretty much similar in the global north and south. But in the south, there is a little access to justice.
We are seeing huge spikes in countries all over the world, rich and poor, north and south. And the levels of violence have reached proportions for it to be called a shadow pandemic. Actually, in some countries, they're calling it an epidemic within the pandemic. And there are many reasons for this.
Baharati Sadavizam is a regional gender advisor for the United Nations Development Programme in Istanbul.
I think, first of all, there is the issue of lockdown and quarantine, putting people, families into very confined spaces in extended periods of isolation, with a lot of usual support services cut off. So there is very little access to normal shelters or services that women have access to in times that are not, when they're not in lockdown. There's also, of course, all the anxieties of the time, all the traumatic issues that people are going through related to work, to health, to jobs, to their futures. There are extended school closures, there are children at home all the time. There's a lot of burden of care work. There's also the health issues, because there's lots of sick people who cannot go to hospital and they're home. So there's a lot of combined issues that are creating a kind of pressure cooker situation at home for families.
Stuck at home and scared, how do women seek help?
Many countries have also set up mobile applications, by which I mean web-based and mobile applications, so that women don't have to make voice calls, which could endanger them dramatically in such a situation. So women have been reported trying to call or whisper from closed bathrooms and getting as much privacy as they can within the home. So to respond to that, there's been quite a large spread of these mobile apps.
The good news is that women's groups across borders are working hard to help abused women. But in Iraq, a country is still reeling from protest and violence from war. Resources are limited. The lockdown began in mid-March and eased in late April. For Aisha, the pandemic just added more danger to her life. As corona cases spread through the camp, her kids are showing signs of trauma.
My youngest kid, he gets up at night suddenly scared. He wets himself because of fear.
Another child sleepwalks. Aisha sent me a photo with red marks on one of her daughter's legs. Aisha says the marks are scars from Samir's beatings. Samir, who Aisha says is an alcoholic, attacks most often when he's drunk. When Aisha and her children returned home after escaping Samir the last time, the windows and doors were broken. He's gone now, but what if he comes back? Aisha says her only way out is to get out of Iraq and far away from her ex-husband.
I hope that international organizations can protect us, or if they can support us to move to Europe for a better life, because we are really struggling.
The NGO Harikar gives financial support to Aisha, and her lawyer Yusuf has applied for asylum to a third country for the family. Aisha even prefers moving to Jordan than staying in Iraq, and that's where she might end up. But with borders closed and migration halted in this pandemic, Aisha has nowhere to run. This is Menel Raach for On Spec.
Thank you for listening to On Spec, and thanks Menel for such a powerful story. The story was done across 4 different time zones. Menel is in California, and she communicated with Aisha and others in Iraq in Arabic through voice memos on the phone. Me and Özge Sabzeci edited the story from Istanbul, thanks to Aisha Kutuk in Tunisia, who did the voiceovers for Aisha in Iraq, and Hanada Hariri in Istanbul for the voiceover of Rasha Khalid. Guzide Dikar helped with Kurdish translation from Diyarbakir, Turkey. Yeah, we're all over the world at OnSpec, but we know how to connect through the continents. Our pandemic season has been made possible with funding from the European Journalism Center and National Geographic Fund. Keep listening because we've got one more story for this season. It's about children and how they've been coping with the pandemic. I'll introduce you to my kids and one very strong teenage girl from Malawi. Please rate, review, and give your feedback about OnSpec on iTunes.